My name's David W. Klossing. I'm a tax attorney and a CPA simultaneously. I have about 30 years of experience. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of people get in trouble or have exposure for something called evasion of payment. Evasion of payment is where you take actions that the government could criminally prosecute to avoid paying tax that you legally owe, usually through self-assessed returns. It's about your actions that you take after you file returns to avoid payment of the tax, either federally or with the state. That involves concealing the income you have coming in that could be used to pay the tax liability, or hiding assets that you could use to sell and make payment. Federal and state case law is riddled with examples of actions that you could take would be potentially criminally prosecuted as an attempt or an actual action to avoid payment of tax. The mere failure to pay assessed taxes is not criminally prosecutable. Here are some actions that if you took and the government could prove it, you might go to jail for evasion of payment. If you transfer title to your assets, you hide assets in entities or third parties' names, that could get you in trouble. If you conduct your business through a false identity or through an undisclosed entity, thereby concealing the assets of that business or the income generated by it, frequently involving family members, you could go to jail for evasion of payment. If you fraudulently cause your employer to eliminate wage withholding because you don't want to pay taxes anymore, that could be prosecuted several different ways. If you start engaging in cash structuring such that the payments you receive are always less than $10,000, you could be prosecuted for several crimes related to that. If you start moving all your assets offshore, hiding bank accounts in foreign lands, you could be prosecuted for evasion of payment. Keep in mind, on the other hand, the simple willful failure to pay tax, in the absence of just affirmative actions to hide assets or hide income, is a misdemeanor. Matthew Tucci of West Long Branch, New Jersey, recently pled guilty to federal tax evasion charges where he concealed assets in order to avoid paying more than $2 million of self-assessed income taxes for the years 2015 and 2016. In order to hide assets from IRS collection officers, Tucci started buying real estate. And then he did a web of title transfers to hide his true ownership in that real estate from collection agents. In prosecuting Tucci, the government had to prove the following three elements to get him for evasion of payment. One, a substantial tax was due. The second element, affirmative act of evasion, really became the focus of investigators when they traced a pattern of real estate transactions designed to hide his true ownership of that underlying real estate. Tucci continued to collect rents, determine sales prices, and direct refinance proceeds. When the IRS issued standard balance due notices, Tucci's response was not payment of the tax due and owing, but further concealment of his income and assets. Third element is often the toughest for prosecutors to prove. Tucci's contemporaneous handwritten notes, his emails directing title companies to take certain actions, the false statement he made in 2019 regarding not being associated with that entity, all pointed to that he understood his duty, that he had to pay his taxes, and he chose to fraudulently violate it. Over the years, courts have pointed to lots of actions somebody could take to show willful intent. They tend to call these badges of fraud. All of the actions surround concealment, misrepresentation, or personal benefit as decisive proof of willful intent. Most unpaid taxes are resolved through largely civil procedures. IRS sends out tons of notices, they file federal liens. If necessary, if they're not getting what they need, they'll levy bank accounts or wages. Once the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS gets involved with a collection case, their special agents can obtain grand jury subpoenas, they can interview witnesses, and if there's enough evidence, they'll prepare a prosecution report for the Income Tax Division of the Federal Department of Justice. Being proactive with IRS and state collection officers before a criminal issue, right? Looking at traditional options to pay what's owed, like installment agreements, offers and compromises, even getting a lien subordination on a piece of property so you can sell it and turn over the proceeds. Bottom line is, evasive actions in a collection scenario rarely succeed. If cash flow issues are generally a problem, preventing you from making full payment, compile bank statements, medical bills, or other records showing the inability to pay rather than demonstrating an unwillingness to pay. The civil and criminal penalties when you're hit with evasion of payment are astronomical. Tax evasion carries with it a prison sentence of 5 years in jail per count, fines of up to $100,000 for individuals, $500,000 for corporations. They can still hit you with restitution for any unpaid taxes, and you wind up with a permanent criminal record that can prevent you from continuing in your chosen profession if there's a moral character element to it. In addition to criminal penalties, civil penalties can also be imposed, like a civil fraud penalty of 75% of the additional income tax involved. When should you seek legal advice for your tax problems? If you've failed to pay an assessed federal or state income tax, if you've transferred assets to anybody in a way that could appear evasive, or if you've taken a position on any tax return or collection information statement, if you have concerns about potential tax evasion, if you're facing an IRS or state tax investigation related to your tax filings, it's crucial that you counsel with somebody that's experienced and trained for this scenario. Myself, I can provide you with guidance in navigating the complexities of tax law and help you understand your options resolving compliance issues. If you've been short paying payroll taxes, that's usually a sign your business is sinking, and it's a great way to find yourself criminally prosecuted. For example, a Pennsylvania man was recently sentenced to 24 months in prison for evading payment on his personal income taxes and his company's employment taxes. The defendant illegally concealed assets, fraudulently avoiding paying over $400,000 of self-assessed employment and income taxes. Mr. Miller owned an insurance business. For the tax years 2007 and 2009 and 2011, he filed personal income tax returns reporting that he owed tax, but he didn't make any efforts to pay his tax liability. He reported employment taxes owed, but again failed to make the payments as required. Miller concealed assets in nominee bank accounts that he controlled. He structured real estate deals in a manner that hid his ownership of them. In total, Miller caused an estimated tax loss of over $478,000 to the IRS. In addition to his 24-month prison sentence, Miller was ordered to serve 3 years of supervised release and to pay $180,000 of restitution to the United States government. The Miller case demonstrates the significant repercussions of evading taxes, including imprisonment and stiff financial penalties. This is especially true of those that don't pay over employment-related taxes. As the federal and most state government's largest source of revenue, employment taxes, they have a vested interest in ensuring that employers are paying over amounts that are withheld from employee paychecks. If you're in a collection scenario and you haven't filed all the required income tax returns, I want you to be aware of a crime called SPEES evasion. It's a legal theory where tax evasion can be found where somebody willfully fails to file a tax return and his or her actions are coupled with affirmative acts of evasion. The court stated, "We think willful evasion can be inferred from the following actions: keeping a double setup, making false entries or alterations in your books, producing false invoices or documents, destruction of books or records, concealment of assets, covering up sources of income, handling one's affairs in a manner where the records that would usually trace that activity are unavailable. And lastly, any conduct, the likely effect of which would be to mislead sources of income or assets. Making any false statement to the IRS, either oral or written in a collection scenario, can get you prosecuted for evasion of payment.